Hello and welcome to episode 53 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every Friday morning so we can build a better marketing strategy. Hi Claire, how are you doing?
Really good. How are you?
Excellent. Actually, we've got two Claires on today. So we've got Claire Walmsley-Moss, one of our guests, who's going to be talking about green and ethical marketing. And then we've got Claire Harris, who's normally joining us as well. How are you, Claire?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. How are you?
Good, thank you. Yes. So Claire, you're our guest today. Sorry, I should say Claire. Let's call you Claire WM. Is that right?
That's good.
This is going to be tricky for me, I know. Claire with an I. Let's say that. So we met through LinkedIn, and we were just talking earlier before we started recording. You said it was about 4 years ago, and you're a freelancer in marketing and communications, helping businesses kind of do what we do, but actually working with them. So I like talking about it. You actually help them do it. And you were looking for other marketing people and other people in that sort of creative industry in the area. And so we met through LinkedIn. We actually went and had a coffee at the Trouble House, which was local to us. It's in between Cirencester and Tetbury, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. Very nice. Had a coffee there. And my wife, Lou, came along as well because she was a copywriter. So it's good to meet her. And in fact, I think you two have worked together when you were working at Planet Mark recently.
That's right.
But yeah, so you were, your last project sort of was working full time with Planet Mark, and then you've come back to freelancing again. Maybe before you dive into your presentation, just give us a little bit about your expertise, history, what you've been up to.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in marketing forever. It feels like 25 years or so. Started off at law firms in London. Well, actually, I grew up in Cirencester, so my very first job was in Mitsubishi Motors or Colt Car.
Oh, right.
But I was just desperate to get to London. That's yes. The big bright light. So about 8 years working in international law firms, and then I had my son and wanted to go freelance, and ended up we've moved back to Gloucestershire by then, and have worked with a number of businesses in the local area. Of all, from aviation to construction to IT, lots of different industries. And it's just sort of, built. But in the last 5 or so years, I focus more on businesses that care about their impact on the planet and on society. So I was working with Electrifly, who were developing an electric propelled racing aeroplane, a bit like a Red Bull air race.
Yes, I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, and they ended up working with Rolls-Royce, and they flew the ACEL project plane in March, I think it was this year. So they beat the airspeed record, which was the plans, which was great. But I sort of helped them with a bit of profile raising and reaching out to sponsors. And I've worked with Snow Business, who have their site just outside Stroud have got solar panels, and they have EV cars, and most of their products are recycled or recyclable. So really strong environmental ethos running through their business, despite the fact that they're part of the film industry. Cool. And then worked with like I said, Planet Mark for 2 years. With a rebrand and a tour, which I've got a slide in my presentation. I can just talk a bit more about that. But Planet Mark are sustainability certification. So they help a business manage their carbon footprint and social value measurements, report on those annually, and provide workshops and information sessions and help them communicate what those companies are doing to transition to a better way of working.
And I may be wrong, but is it part of the Eden Project, or connected to the Eden Project?
It is, yes, and yes and no. So each member that takes on a certification through Planet Mark, 5% of that is donated to the Eden Project, to their reforestation projects and their projects that they run for educational projects. And also members can choose to buy an acre of rainforest, but sort of contribute through Cool Earth, who protect rainforests in Peru and Indonesia.
And talking of rainforests, I love your soundtrack background. You said you got the door open and the birds are singing. It's perfect for this topic.
That's Tetbury birds tweeting away.
They're very loud.
I can
No, it's
shut the
nice.
door.
No, it's perfect. It's exactly the sound effect we need. Couldn't have done anything better myself.
It always amazes me that something so small can make so much noise. That's incredible.
I know we live quite reasonably near to the motorway, but usually it's just the blur in the background. But there was one lovely sunny day, and Lou and I were sat out in the garden, and the noise of the motorway dipped. You couldn't really hear it at all. I think everyone was having barbecues, and the bees in the tree next door to us, or very close to us, were louder than the motorway. That's what you could hear, these bees sort of busily buzzing around in the tree. So that's amazing. Right. So would you like to share your presentation? Get going. And then I've got a few questions for you, but definitely in this area, because I'm quite keen for us to develop what we do.
No sound. If I do that, does that work? Is that just, you're just seeing the one slide?
That looks good. Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. Cool. So do you want me to just carry on and dive in?
Yeah, you go for it.
Well, hello everybody. It's really good to see you all. And I'm hopefully going to talk a bit about how we as marketers can approach the way that we market in a more environmentally friendly way, regardless of what your business is. It could be a purpose-led business, or it could be what might be termed as a regular business that's really thinking about their impact on the planet and on society, and trying to sort of work towards a better way and a better future. So yeah, that's a bit about me. That's us at the Eden Project. Yeah, background in agency and in-house professional services and B2B marketing mostly, but also B2B2C. So we're not direct to the consumers, but through another company to the consumers. And as part of my role at Planet Mark, we needed to find a way to raise our profile, and we were talking to hundreds of people. We wanted to talk to thousands. So I came up with this idea to hire this fully electric coach that we took all around the country last year in the run-up to COP26, and we started down in Cornwall the same weekend as the G7 summit, and managed to, because of the charging challenges we had with the infrastructure, we managed to get lots of local press, which was...
I was going to say, I bet that's a beast to charge.
Yeah, there was actually only 2 charging stations that were compatible to the coach. So it was a kind of that range anxiety. Well, are we going to make it? And we did. It was all good. But at each stop around the country, we delivered information sessions around what is net zero and how does a business transition to a net zero way of working. And then ended up at COP26, and were involved in lots of sort of fringe events there. But yeah, so Ben has returned to freelancing this year and working with several businesses. I've working with a charity at the moment called Designability, and they are developing a EV charge point guidance on how to make that accessible for disabled people, and lots of other sort of businesses locally. And one of the areas that I focus on is helping a business, if they are going through some sort of transition to be more sustainable in their way of working, and it's such an umbrella term, sustainable, but how they can then communicate that with authenticity and with transparency, and not be sort of seen as tick box exercise or greenwashing.
Yeah, Claire, before you go on, would you describe or explain what greenwashing is? I think people would have heard it, but maybe it's good to have a good definition in mind, so we can look out for it and maybe challenge those companies.
I suppose it would be where a business is maybe saying that they are something to look. I've got some examples actually of some sort of a bit further down, to look as if they are trying to do something positive. But actually, when you lift up that lid and you look below the surface, you actually find that it's not truthful. It's not backed up by anything credible, and also sometimes that comes from a lack of understanding, because it's such a complex area. So hopefully that
Yeah, it may not be deliberate. It may be they think they're doing something or enough, and actually what they're doing is just on the surface, and it's not really deep. Yeah. Okay. Well, the examples will probably help.
Yeah, and I think there is a bit of a crackdown on it, because I think there are some unscrupulous companies that it's a way of trying to persuade somebody to buy what they're trying to sell, knowing that they'll just go for it because it says it's green.
Yeah, true.
So we'll hopefully cover today some things around just generally around us being aware of our impact on the world, in the way that we work and the way that we operate. Some sort of effective and mindful impacts of the way that we market. We'll go through different things like images and videos and websites and so on. Jargon-free communications, inspiring stories, avoiding greenwash, and then thinking about the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis, our suppliers, our customers, the teams and the individuals that we work with, and any legislation that sort of might impact and affect us in the future, so that a business can be future-proofed for this transition that we're all moving towards. And then if it's helpful, I'll put some links in the chat at the end for extra reading and further information. So I think in 2019, I started to see, because I'd been working in more of a sort of, the environmental focused organisations for a couple of years before then, so from about 2017. And I felt very much like I was banging my head against the wall, but the media started to pick up on this a lot more, I think, in 2019. And it was great to see some coverage and some enthusiasm and some interest. And then definitely through the pandemic, everybody was a lot more aware of the natural surroundings outside of where they live. And then obviously with last year with COP26, there was a lot more media coverage. And that's really positive, because I think it's starting to get now on the agenda of individuals and businesses and community groups, and people are really sort of keen to learn and keen to understand how they can do things better, and maybe not aware of the negative impacts of the decisions that they make. So it's really good to see that, and we're certainly seeing that through companies like Planet Mark, that organisations that are joining there. There's a lot of organisations that really want to transition to a better way of working, and even the end goal is to be giving back to the planet and giving back to society. But communicating this is challenging, because it's really complicated. There's lots of things that keep changing, and it's almost like a new industry. So hopefully some of these things that we'll cover today will help unpick that. So I think by having a mindful impact on the decisions that we make as marketers, this was a challenge that we had last year with the tour. We wanted obviously to communicate to as many people as possible, and we knew that having really engaging images and videos on social would help raise our profile, but we were also beginning to be aware of the carbon impact of those decisions that we were making. And so there was that kind of that juggling act of, well, we've got to get the message out there because it's a really important message, but we also don't want to be creating a huge carbon footprint for ourselves in doing that.
Yeah.
So we started to kind of, dig below the surface and find out information around the site, and these will all be things that will feed into what you say, Ben, in terms of what a website should be like, in terms of being responsive and being fast and being fully optimized. The smaller the file size of your images, using a shorter video rather than a longer high definition video, ensuring that your website is fast and responsive. Those all reduce, they have the positive impacts from an SEO point of view and site maintenance and optimization, but also have a positive impact on less carbon. And it's a bit little bit complex about that. We were talking just before we started around you might be able to have your website hosted on a green server, but it's also then the person visiting the website at the end and what they're using. Are they running on green energy supply at home, that kind of thing. So an interesting fact I discovered actually only very recently, the digital industry, so that's everything from the making of the devices, the infrastructure, and then the using of the devices, has a higher carbon footprint than the aviation industry.
Gosh, that's crazy, isn't it? Because we always think that planes pump out lots of carbon dioxide and they're big polluters for that. Wow.
Yeah. I had a conversation with somebody a few months ago. I said, "Oh, we're a digital company. We don't have a carbon footprint." Oh, actually, sorry, you do.
I know there's a site we were talking about earlier that I found, which we'll look at after your presentation, which we think we're doing well, and then it highlights things that actually you can do a lot better.
and that's great, isn't it? It's just always learning, just finding out how we can do things better. Is a really positive and optimistic way to look at it, because I think the whole climate crisis situation can feel really overwhelming. So I think it's really important to do what we can rather than burying our heads in the sand about it. And I mean, I've put in there ways we can communicate, and that's, we've all learned through the pandemic of different ways of working. So having a face-to-face meeting, which will involve maybe travel, is great, but to do that all the time, the carbon impact as well as the time and the cost impacts of that. Whereas now we've all sort of learned how to shift to digital ways of working. But I think we've also sometimes forgotten to use the phone. And sometimes just having a phone call with somebody, it sort of can help to channel and focus your attention, but also it's a lesser carbon footprint than maybe doing a Zoom or a Teams meeting.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point, actually. And it has the additional advantage that it might be quicker as well, because the Zoom call, you're kind of sat, you might relax into it because it's a meeting, whereas a phone call it's a bit quicker. Yeah, that's a good point.
Good point. Yeah, really good. And I think as marketers, we might have an event or an exhibition to go to, and so we're like, right, we've got to have giveaways, we've got to have a goodie bag and posters and banners and all these kind of things, which there's then things that we can do as marketers to look at the products, the materials that are being used to make those things. So for example, on the tour recently, we had a whole load of pull-up banners and sort of big banners to have on the entrance to venues. We use the more traditional, the metal framed and roll-up banners, because we were going to be using them again and again. We knew that they needed to be rigid and long-lasting. We had a couple of events where people would come along and they had theirs maybe done on a cardboard frame. And there was one situation where as soon as we put that together, it fell apart. So that was a complete waste of those resources. There are companies where the printing materials are recycled or vegan-based ink. And if you're maybe doing a pull-up banner and it's got a white background to it, it's using less ink than something that's got a solid background. So that has a flip effect to online images, which we'll come on to in a bit about the colours used. But yeah, so I think it's just, as marketers, just thinking about asking questions. If we say we need to have a goodie bag for something, do we need 5 items in there or do we just need 1 or 2? That whole sort of concept of refuse and reduce and reuse before recycling is just sort of really important to think about.
Yeah, it is. Do we need to give them more stuff that they're just going to go straight into the bin?
In the bin, yeah. And I went to Active Buildings and I did COP Gloucestershire last year, and they had a goodie bag at the end. And actually, I was really intrigued to see what they thought about to put in that. And so there was a brochure in there that was a matte finish rather than a gloss finish and used recycled paper. They had a water bottle, and I thought, oh, do I really need another water bottle? But actually, with children, you often they get lost and broken and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really, really good, strong one. But yeah, and that was it basically, and in a jute bag. But again, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about plant-based products. They have to come from a plant, and so at the moment, the natural rainforests are being removed to plant palm trees or to plant a hemp or something that to make. So it's looking at that whole picture of and asking the questions about where something comes from and really thinking about, well, actually, could something in a plastic be better than this?
Yeah, that's true. I went to a word camp conference. I think it was in Brighton, and they had some goodie bags. But again, they were pretty thoughtful goodie bags. They had the bags themselves weren't plastic. They were ones you could use for shopping again. So they'd roll up. They were cotton or some fabric, maybe hemp. I'm not sure, but you could roll them up and use them for shopping. They gave you a mug, a travel mug, which they then expected you to use for your coffee and tea throughout the day or through the couple of days it was on. So they would give you other cups if you needed it, but they expected you to use this, so that saved on washing up. Yeah. And the food they supplied for this WordPress conference was vegan. They didn't tell you that. They just said it just was vegan. And what a great way to introduce a lot of people. And most people are like, fine, it doesn't, it's just food. They don't really think about it too much. But for the people who were vegan, it's great, and vegetarian, nice and easy for them. But they did get a few complaints. People said, I want meat. But when you go to conferences, the meat is usually pretty low quality and pretty poor anyway. So actually I'm much more in favor, and the food was delicious. So what a great way to sort of lessen the impact and make it easier for people. So they do tend to, at WordPress conferences, they do tend to think about those things as well. And it's interesting when you look at it, a lot of people don't pay that much attention, and you're right, we should always be saying, do we need that? What is the right thing? Yeah. And
it's also not always a straightforward thing. So
no.
I know a tomato flown in from Spain compared to a banana shipped in from South America has, when you're looking at the carbon impact of that, or grass-fed local beef compared to something that's been again shipped in from the other side of the world. Always a question. There's no wrong or right answer as such.
No, there isn't. And even what galls me is you go to a conference and there's a load of waste. I went to a conference and they lunch was finished and they just chucking it all away, which was crazy. But the WordPress one, they boxed it all up and left it there and said, please take it with you. I was like, yes, for my train journey home, I'm having that, thanks. And it's thinking about little things like that. If you're going to put something on, why waste all that food? Where can it go? Can people take it? I don't know.
We had that last week. We had a filming day up in Cheltenham, a couple of days for the CV project, and a whole load of catered food for us. And then at the end, I went there with my little plate and I put a whole bunch of stuff on my plate, and then I took it into the park and sat in the sunshine before driving home. It was lovely. So
anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
We've gone off. So I wanted to just sort of talk about images that online images for websites and so on, and having a white background, which I tend to use a lot because I'm getting old. I can't see. I like things being on a white background, but actually having images with a darker background they draw less energy to be viewed, and I think we were sort of feeling in the last few years of Planet Mark, we wanted really bright and inspiring and optimistic images, but actually, and going dark seemed like the wrong way to go. But actually, you can have a lot of fun and a lot of texture in the examples that we've got here. I suppose what I'm trying to say is don't shy away from going for slightly darker colours and still have a really good impact.
And by darker colours or the impact, is this on the end user's computer or the actual rendering of the page?
So I think it's on both. So in terms of, it all depends what devices you have and what screens you have and how they pull up. I think, looking at things on iPhones are better than maybe something that's a much older monitor. It's your name more in terms of the technical details of that than me, but the brighter the image, the more energy it needs to display that.
Yeah, and even if it's only a small amount, if you've got millions of users, it's a small amount times a million. Yeah.
And and on that point, it's kind of like emails, copying in 10 different people on an email. Do they really all need to be copied in? Because that's sending that message out 10 times.
You're right. You're right.
But yeah, there's this is one of the sort of links we can put in the chat, or there's others that I think you've been finding as well, Ben. But the Greenwed Foundation have got some really good blogs and tools on there on things that we can do. I've got a client that's going to have a new website soon, so this is going to be top of their agenda of making sure that the way the website is built, the length of the page, and affects the amount of energy again that's being used to view it. So looking at where they're hosting. Unfortunately, Amazon's AWS is sort of on green servers, but they're not one of the best. So again, it's that investigating and looking into the details and really seeing if the green energy is from renewable sources rather than maybe from green gas. A bit of a rabbit warren, a bit of a Google mine hole. So going on to communicating in a way that if the business is going through a transition, and it's great to be able to share what you're doing with the outside world. David Attenborough says lots of amazing things. And one of the things he said most recently is that saving our planet is now a communications challenge. And so I feel that us as marketers have a responsibility to look at the way that we communicate so that we are doing so with care, with authenticity, and with transparency. We're not greenwashing, we're not trying to mislead people that we are doing something that we're not. And I think, we've got some examples coming up here. Jargon is rife in every industry, isn't it? And using sort of acronyms and things. And what does that actually mean? Using colloquial language and just really explaining what that means. It'd be better explained when we go through each of these examples. But doing this just sort of helps to make sure that we're... Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. That's my dog.
Yeah, flapping ears.
Flapping ears. Because obviously, we're in charge of the reputation of the business. So it's really important that anything that we put out there is factful. It's rigorously backed up by the truths, but also to be inspiring, because the climate crisis it can be overwhelming, and I think we need to be optimistic, and it's not easy, but we're trying. And I think by being honest and saying, look, this is where we want to go, but we're not there yet. We need to do this. It's really good for your reputation, but it's also really good to inspire your competitors and other people in your business community to think, oh, they're doing that, we could try that. And I think that's a really good way of making sure that we can transition really, really quickly. But it also helps to, I think there's a real trend now of people, certainly in their 20s and 30s, they don't want to work for you sort of old-fashioned sort of corporations. They want to work with businesses that genuinely care about their people and care about their communities and care about their impact on the wider world. And there are lots of sort of legislation coming in around. I mean, the government has set the UK's net zero target for 2050. So that means that every organisation needs to be at net zero by then at the latest. So that has a massive impact on everybody. Tesco's, for example, last year wrote to all of their suppliers and said, we're going net zero, which means you have to. So the sort of knock-on effect of those large organisations doing that, and then it's also being pushed up from small organisations starting now with purpose at their core. So we're going to see a real shift in this very quickly, I think. So here's some examples to try and help explain what I mean by sort of greenwashing or using words that don't really say anything as much. So this is from an agency in London called Radley Elder, and they're really strong on sustainability communications. And so the first one, we're committed to a sustainable journey. What does that mean? And so on the other side, this is their other option of kind of being honest and acknowledging that there's going to be challenges and pitfalls along the way, but we'll get there. You know, join us and we'll get there together. Another one of there's a label on a t-shirt. It's eco-friendly, but you know how? It's not really explaining how it's eco-friendly. It's green. It's got a planet on it. It's got nice soft font, but what does it mean? Whereas the other one, it tells you what it's made from and what their values and their ethos is behind this.
Yeah, and why that matters. Because I think you're right. A lot of messaging is saying, yeah, that's sustainable. Or this example says this T-shirt is good for the planet. How? It might be, but how is that? And you're right. It's better to say, and actually they're using, like you're saying, the right colors and the little planet symbol, making it all seem quite nice. But actually the other one that says made from waste, worn by people with taste. Nice. I like it. Because you see a lot of things they made from bamboo, but they don't explain why that's good. If that bamboo is actually managed in the right way, and they're not getting rid of sort of native plants to plant bamboo there. So it is quite complex. But yeah, this is quite straightforward, isn't it? That just simple messaging.
Again, this one's about net zero. The first one says net zero by 2030, our journey to a better tomorrow. So again, what exactly does a better tomorrow look like? It's classic of sort of being vague and overused statements. And whereas the other one is acknowledging that this is, mission impossible. No, it's not impossible, but it's going to be challenging. And immediately from the posters that it's punchy and it's as I said there, like the subcopy specifically outlines the target and where to find out more. So it gives you the web address or where you can find out more information about what it is they're actually doing. So that will hopefully go through to a page on their website, which will have maybe a sustainability report or at least a long blog explaining what it is that the company is trying to do to get to net zero. And this one is, great, another classic example of this product is 100% sustainable, but why? Just because it's in green packaging. And this one, I think this is kind of like a mocked up, but there is a very well-known toilet roll company that they come in. It's called Don't Give a Crap or something like that.
That's it. Yeah. Who gives a crap?
Gives a crap. Yeah.
And that's all. Their messaging is very. It's very much about how where the materials come from, and then it's recycled. One interesting thing, and I haven't looked into, each loo roll is wrapped up in paper, whereas normally you buy a pack of 9 or something, and they're all wrapped in plastic usually, which is weird. Sometimes wrapped in paper. But each one is wrapped up, and there was a reason why. I can't remember the reason why. Do you know why they wrap each one in paper? I think there was a purpose behind it.
Yeah, no, I don't know actually.
Yeah.
I mean, they look good, so I think one reason might be because traditionally anything that was eco-friendly looked a bit kind of
grey.
Just a bit grey and boring, wasn't it? And actually they look really super smart and sophisticated, and so it makes it more appealing, I think, to people that wanted, maybe a toilet roll that's actually about showing off to the people that come in.
That's true. I have noticed that some people that aren't often bothered about recycling, they have that toilet paper because they like the look of so it helps move people along and get people thinking about it. That's true.
Yeah, because I think it's very much about Dale Vance as sort of say things like this. It's not about giving up on things. It's not having to completely change our lives and stop having great things. It's about just thinking about what we're doing and whether we can do it better. And I think it's great to see now there's lots of sort of products and companies and organisations that you don't feel like you're having to give something up to be more planet friendly in what you're doing.
Yes, and I can't remember if it's a TV series I watched, which was based on Eat Well for Less, something like Save Well for the Planet, or a podcast I listened to. But they said that it's very difficult to move people to just be green or have use things less or produce less carbon, or basically have a lower output, because people they don't really think like that. They just think about what they want. But it's much easier if you can combine that with saving money.
Yeah.
So if they can save money by doing something, by taking fewer trips, thinking about their journeys, maybe choosing products that don't travel so far, maybe are cheaper if they're bought in the right way. I don't know. But if you can combine the two, people are very willing. That green element, true green element, is a good tick box, and they save money at the same time. Yeah. It's like, and the same with the loo roll. It's got a style motivation behind it. So not only is it recycled and good ethics behind the company. I haven't fully looked into them, so I'm just saying what they say. But it looks nice. That is actually a really strong driver over all of the other plastic packed ones. They can actually proudly display this loo roll rather than hiding it.
Hiding it in the cupboard, yeah. And that's exactly the point of displaying the business benefits of this, of reducing your operational costs and reducing your wastage as well. It's anything that goes in the bin is effectively you're putting money in the bin. So
yeah,
if you can stop that in the first place, then that's the way to go.
You can align it with a secondary benefit. Yeah.
And I think this, we're at the beginning of that transition now. So it's really a way of trying to sort of any business or board or people within an organisation that's maybe not completely sold into this and sees some sort of any transition to a more sustainable way of working to be something that's going to be expensive, but actually realising that longer term picture of the fact that this is going to be coming at us from all different directions, from legislation, from suppliers, from customers, from people that we want to recruit. So it's really a great time to sort of be spearheading and be at the front of this and ahead of the curve and make sure that your business is still there in 10 years' time. I think it was actually Mark Carney that said, businesses that don't transition or don't make this change will fail to exist.
Yeah, and it probably won't happen fast. It'll probably happen slowly, and then suddenly they're out of business. So they won't notice it happening, but they'll just be losing a little client here, the business there, maybe not making more connections, and then suddenly it's gone. Yeah, because they're not moving with it. And you're right. It's if you can jump ahead, not only can you can be moving in that direction, so you can sort of sustain the business in a sort of financial way, but also you can benefit from the marketing of doing the right thing and educating others.
Yeah. So that's basically it. We can put, I don't know which way you want to do this.
Well, I think if you give us any links afterwards, then Claire can make sure they go in the notes to everyone. And I'm wondering, Claire, in fact, I'll come on to this. I've got a little idea about sharing this more widely, but yeah, you go on and sort of share how you can help people, because I think you can really help specifically in this area.
So with a full, what I would call a full mixed marketing background, I think there's a lot of people that work in sustainable. I'm not a sustainability consultant. I haven't gone down that route of training at all. But sustainability consultants tend to be from an academic sort of background. So then trying to sort of distill that complicated terminology and information into marketing speak, for want of a better way of putting it. So I can sort of help with consultancy, with brainstorming. It might be a project that's a rebrand or a website or a launch of a specific campaign that I can help with. So I think, I've always, a lot of my work in the past has always been, certainly when I worked at law firms, you need to put together a profile to go in Legal 500, and you get a 40-page document from the lawyer that you'd have to then turn into 300 words. So just sort of picking through the detail and coming up with compelling stories that, like we said, that will help inspire others to sort of join you on that journey. I've also got quite a strong background in PR, so I think there's certainly a lot, a really strong move now to making better use of PR. And it was great when you had Heidi on the other week. And I think, people are getting a little bit tired possibly of social media, and so finding other routes of getting your messages out there.
Yeah.
And PR is a brilliant way of doing that, as well as round
events. It is. And good for SEO as well. So.
Yeah. So I worked with lots of different sort of businesses of all different sizes, and I can help with marketing, strategy, and plan. Certainly if it's got a sustainability element to it, and helping to recruit the right team. I've a couple of businesses now where they don't have a marketing function, but I've sort of helped them recruit the right people, or provided mentoring and support for the people in-house that might be delivering the day-to-day marketing activities. That's me. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Claire. Just a question while you're going through that. Do you know of environmental consultants who are able to come on and do the sort of dirty work of the calculations and what's needed? Yeah,
definitely. There's a couple of people in Cheltenham, and Hugh McCrone, who's a sustainable business sustainable. Yeah, so I can give you his links, but he does a very similar thing to Planet Mark, where he'll provide the carbon measurements and footprinting, and also provide the support around communicating that. And there's actually quite a few sustainability consultants in the sort of Cheltenham Cirencester area. There's actually there's a thing called People Planet Pint, which was set up by somebody who, as part of the Cambridge Institute sustainability course, and he is doing them all over the country. So we had one in Cirencester last week, I think it was, but which I unfortunately
saw something on LinkedIn about that. Right, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that works.
So it's meant to just be it's like a networking thing. It's for people who are either working in sustainability or want to find out a bit more about it. And it's a really casual, literally like get together, have a pint in a pub. It's always in a pub. And it's just a drink. There's no formal format to it. It's just a good way of getting to know like-minded people.
And there, we were just talking about going out and doing more networking. That seems a perfect excuse, I think. People Planet Pint. We'll try and find something to link that as well for the notes.
And there's also the Future Leap Network in Bristol. They've got some co-working spaces, but they've got a Sustainable Business Festival, 23rd of June, I think it is, down in Bristol at the Paintworks. And so that will be, anybody that wants to sort of meet businesses that are in either already transitioning to something more sustainable or can provide the services to support this, they'll likely be there.
Great. Thanks, Claire. I've got a few questions and something else I want to share with people. So maybe, are you able to stop sharing and we'll get everyone back on screen? And I was just referring to the other Claire now, Claire H. I was just wondering whether because normally we keep these for club members and we put out teasers. So, Claire will create a little teaser, take certain sections from this and put them out directly on LinkedIn. But I'm wondering, Claire, if we just put this out for everyone and make it freely available, because I think it's something that that everyone should really see and start moving towards. So maybe we can make this a completely open session on our website. I'm not sure technically how I'm going to do that, but I'll figure out a way. I think it's worth people seeing. What I've got a few questions here. Do you what I'm always interested in, and I know you mentioned a few consultants, but is there a way, any guides to sort of self-auditing your business to see, sort of give you a figure of where you are now in terms of, various different factors. Carbon could be one of them, and where you want to be. Is there any sort of guides on that?
There's ecology, which actually is not one of the ones I put in our links, which I should do. So ecology are, I think again, they're Bristol based. They originally started off with where you could buy a tree and you can build this sort of like virtual rainforest online to show that the trees that you're buying. And that's actually tree planting is a really good example of could be greenwashing. So when you sort of look into it, I think a lot of people think that they can carry on doing bad stuff, but it's okay because I planted 5 trees. And there's unfortunately not enough space on the planet for us to have enough forests to be able to offset all the bad that's being done. So we definitely have to reduce before, and offsetting should be considered like the very last step, when there's absolutely nothing else you can do to reduce your impacts. But they also work in ensuring that what they do plant is the right species in the right places and well managed forests, and also restoring or preserving existing rainforests and all over the world. But Ecology have now just in the last few months launched a online carbon measurement system. So you don't necessarily, if you don't have the budget to go to somebody like Planet Mark or go through the B Corp process, which is a very different bag altogether. But so Ecology would be a really good one.
Okay, we'll put a link into that. I think it's just to get people started, because what you don't want is to have a barrier of cost to enter into this. You want to just have a figure to work with, and then you can move forward, and it gets you into it. I think once you start down the journey, then you can start to see maybe the benefits of getting a consultant in to eke out those benefits. It's just that I know for a lot of people, they go, well, it's expensive, I'll just leave it. But actually, if they can just start doing some things, it's going to help. Okay.
That sort of leads into my question. Is there a sort of a certain area that you would recommend that they start in?
Yeah, I think definitely if a lot of us are working from home, so the first thing we could do, which links in with the energy crisis that's going on now, is if it's possible, if it's feasible to move to a green energy supplier. The obvious things to look at are always energy, transport, and food. So if there's a way that you can go, I know living out here in sort of the edge of Tetbury, there's a bus once a week, I think, or something like that. So it's not always feasible to go by public transport, but reducing the number of journeys that we do, and if you can afford to transition to a newer car that's less polluting, those kind of things. But it's always it's energy. If you can transition to a green energy supplier, reducing transport in some way, and then food. I mean, I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but there's been lots of programs recently about the amount of money and the amount of carbon that goes into producing food that just ends up in the bin.
Yes, there's I went to the I can't remember the name of it, the Science Museum in Bristol. It's got a funky name. We the Curious, and they had a little mini cookery event on, and in the cookery event you made a vegan burger, and you got to choose. First of all, they did a little test, and they sort of put these things in order. Where do you think the most energy is wasted? And a lot of people think it might be in wonky food or something like that. And that had a component, but it's actually just food wastage. People buying stuff, or supermarkets letting it go to waste. But people buying it and then not using it, or they don't eat everything, they throw it away rather than saving and having it for leftovers. That's one of the seem to be the biggest areas. There's also an app that someone reminded me of recently called Too Good to Waste.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. Yeah.
Which I haven't used yet, just because it's a bit more tricky to find places around Tetbury and Malmesbury and the Cirencester area. But what they do is on the app, you can go and sort of buy a bag full of leftover food. So there's a Hobbs House Bakery over in Malmesbury, and they do very nice bread. And so if you go at the end of their sort of baking session, they'll have leftover bread. They're not going to store it. It has to go, really. So you get a goodie bag of about £3, something worth £10 of bread. the difficulty is you just have to go at a certain time slot. So it's slightly inconvenient for some people, but it might work. I think if you're going there anyway, and you can just adjust your timings, you can get some really good deals on things. Big garages, BP garages do it, supermarkets do it. It looks quite good.
Yeah, there's the little shop, I think it's, I don't know if it's a co-op, but the little shop in Shurston does it too. So those are our two local ones, is the Need Bakery and Hobbs. But also, if you've got a freezer, or if you've got a whole bunch of people coming around at the weekend, or hungry teenagers, I often have a house full of, then it's great, because you can go and get something like that and it'll be gone by the next day. So
yeah, it goes very quickly. So something I just wanted to briefly touch on, and it works in line with the green hosting website you mentioned, is, and I don't know where I picked this from up. I was just doing some research before we spoke, and it's a website called Ecograder. So I'm just going to search for this now, because I think this might be quite interesting to run through. Now, I've actually done two websites. I've done Planet Mark and I've done ours. So I'll do the Planet Mark one first, because it's got a better score, as it should do. So this is Ecograder. And now I'll just give some context. So our website is hosted on a green hosting provider, 34SP, and it's using Cloudflare for the CDN, the Content Delivery Network, which is mostly green, but they do offset some. I think that you can basically, they're very transparent, very good Cloudflare, and they talk about it often. And so I know that's green. But you then start looking at it and think, well, is Google green? So we use Google trackers, Google Analytics. We also use Google YouTube. So is Google green? Well, I mean, looking at their business, it says they buy 100% renewable now. They've been doing it since 2017 or 18, something like that. But they're buying green energy, which is great, but they're not producing their own direct green energy at the moment, fully at the moment. So, that's something they're working towards. So that's good. But then maybe there are other things like fonts, other trackers from different places. And so a website is not just what you can see on screen. It's all of these little bits in the background that come from different places, have their own impact. So while I know this, it's quite good to look at a site like this, which sort of breaks that apart. So I'll just quickly go through this one because it looks quite good. So it's saying that actually it's very good, Planet Mark, in terms of the eco grading. Most things are 100%. There's probably a few at 98%, 92%, but those improvements have probably take a lot of work to get them up to 100%. And generally speaking, it's saying the page rendering is good. It's generally accessible. It's good for SEO in terms of you've got good SEO practices, and good SEO practices generally mean the page loads faster and is more efficient, all the way through to it's a nice small page size, and it's got green hosting. Now look at ours. Sadly, the score's a bit lower. Now, I actually did a speed comparison on both sites. I can't remember whose was fastest, but they're pretty much the same. They're about 300 milliseconds each. So it's like our site is just as fast as Planet Mark's, but our site is double the size. Our size is about 5 meg, Planet Mark is about 2.5. Now, this isn't a competition between the two. It's just a good example here. So looking at this, we actually get a poor score, not because our website is not on green hosting. I think it says that 100% for that. It's because we have a lot of assets. We've got bigger file sizes. We're not using WebP yet. We will be. So like if I look at our site speed, we're really good already. If we actually halved the file size and brought it down to where Planet Mark is to improve our score on this, I mean, who knows how fast it could be? It should be, many milliseconds faster than that, maybe 100, 200 milliseconds faster. But there's lots of little things. I think there's a few things in ours where we could, our accessibility is pretty good. Overall page weight, that's one area we need to improve upon. There's definitely a few areas where we can reduce code. Anyway, I won't go into this now. It's definitely worth people running their site through ecograder.com. The reason I bring it up is we've got a fast site. It delivers it fast. It's efficient. It's SEO optimized. But what we haven't looked at is just eking out these other bits where we're kind of leaking inefficiency. And so it's definitely something to look at on top of that. And this will help really people look at it. I think the biggest issue for us is we've got lots of server requests. So we're loading lots of little assets. So there could be ways of combining those together. And obviously, if we go through all of this and make it a greener site, so it's using less energy to render, and it's going to use less energy for the person in the browser to render as well, so they're using less energy, we get a better site out of it. That will improve our SEO performance. It'll improve usability and interaction. So it's all good. So definitely, this is quite a fun thing to work through. Rather than just looking at speed of your website, there's lots of other little factors as well. I think that's it. I mean, that's one of the things it's this chain effect. It's like you can be really good, but you've got to look at your suppliers, and you've got to look at who supplies you and who you buy from. And I think there's a big chain, and if you can start influencing that chain, that has this ripple effect. And I know you mentioned that, but I think that's actually something, when it comes down to communication, that's where it's really key. Is there anything you want to finish on, Claire? Anything you want to mention?
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's just about being curious, just sort of spending the time
being curious. Yes, absolutely. So Claire, there isn't, sorry, Claire H, there isn't another webinar next week because we've got the Jubilee, I think. So so we'll be off and everyone having a break. And then Claire will get back to you on Basecamp and let you know what's coming up in June. So we've got a few things planned. I don't think that it's quite settled yet. We're going to have a talk and work out the schedule after this. But that's it. So we're here every Friday at 10 a.m. We cover everything from strategy, social, SEO, and sometimes green issues as well. If you have something exciting to share, or you're watching and you want to come on and talk about something, email us, support@ratherinvented.com. If you can't come, feel free to share this link with a friend so people can come on live if they want to. But, you know, most of you watch the videos, which is a great way to catch up on all the recordings. Everything we've done over the last 3 years is available for you to watch. So thank you very much, Claire, for presenting. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Bye for now.